Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening and welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and really excited to be back once again talking about my favorite subject, small business. At the end of the day, your business can only go as far as you're prepared to take it. So that's why we created Leadership Live, to help you gain knowledge, perspective, insights, and leadership capabilities from other successful entrepreneurs and business owners and small business thought leaders. So each week we have a great guest. I'm really looking forward to tonight's guest. We've got Oz, and we're going to be talking about really smart funding strategies for business owners. We're going to look at good debt versus bad debt. And actually, even this week, I met with some business owners who talked about that they've never used that, but could have benefited from it as part of their growth strategies. But also some people, so I've talked to business owners who have gotten the wrong type of debt, and that's really hurt them in their business. So I think tonight's conversation can be very valuable, and hopefully you have some great takeaways. So tonight, I'm talking to someone who has a lot of experience in this area. I think we'll have a great conversation because most people really have an understanding of a few different types of financing, but Oz has a perspective that's much broader and wider. So I think we'll be able to really help you have more perspective and understanding around financing and what might work best for you. So let me bring Oz on right now. Hey, Oz, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Andrew. How you doing?
Excellent, excellent. Welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent, excellent. So, we know each other some, but the audience doesn't know you at all. So it would be great if you could take a few minutes to talk a little bit about your journey, how you came to where you are and some of the key milestones and lessons learned before we dig into the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I come from an immigrant family. I came to the United States when I was 16 years old with my sister and my mom. My dad had been here for a lot longer than us at that moment. So that was the unintentional start of my entrepreneurial journey. So when we came to the United States, we wanted to live the American dream, obviously. And I thought we were going to succeed immediately because my father had owned a business, right? So he had owned a butcher shop. But 2 months into it, we found out that he was on the verge of bankruptcy. He didn't share with us. He is great at what he does, but he is really bad at finances. He wasn't trained on it. So he didn't understand money, basically, and he had to put an end to his business. That created a lot of trauma, as you can imagine, through the family over the years after that event happened. He filed for bankruptcy. Then all of us had to kind of go around and while finishing school, get jobs, learn English and all of that. And I did start going to college. I did double major biology and chemistry. But that experience stuck with me because I was brought up believing that America is the land of the opportunity. But then what we experienced was like total opposite of that. And I was scratching my head trying to figure out, why did this happen, right? So I'm an educated person going to college, but not really understanding how that could have happened. It wasn't until I finished college, I was about to go to medical school, and that conversation with my guidance counselor at some point shed some light into what was happening, because she told me that, all right, you can go to medical school, but you're going to graduate with a lot more debt if you do that. That's when it hit me. I said, I don't want to be poor forever, basically, right? Because we've been struggling with finances up to that point. Then if I had gone to medical school, it would have been more of those struggles. And that led me down to a rabbit hole of researching how to make more money, basically. And whatever I read kept saying that I got to get in sales. So after getting my diploma, I got into 100% commission sales jobs, basically selling door to door, because that was the most I could offer to companies, honestly, with my zero background in sales. Then I was like 100% commission salesperson in New York City, in New Jersey, selling credit card processing, payroll, and all kinds of different services, until I came across a gentleman who was in the loan brokerage industry, basically selling loans and funding opportunities to businesses. And he wanted to build some kind of referral relationship. And then I said, okay, I didn't understand half of what he was talking about when it comes to businesses needing money and how they can't get it from the bank and how this is a unique opportunity. In my mind, I'm like, all right, man, if you want to build a relationship, I can refer you some businesses. I made a couple of introductions to him, and like a week later, he called me saying that, Oz, I've funded one of your customers. This was a customer that I sold like a POS touchscreen system. I said, oh, that's cool. Awesome. He's like, yeah, but I got your check. We got to meet up so I can hand you the check. And I have a picture of that moment, actually. So I got the check. I looked at it. It was like $4,000. It was for $4,000. So that was a, pivotal moment in my life, because I never seen that much money and my name together on a piece of paper before. And then that was my intro to the alternative lending industry, which is, some of the topics that we're probably going to be talking about tonight. And from that point on, I went so deep into, why businesses need capital. It explained why my father failed at his business because he didn't have the financial literacy. I started questioning why we don't learn this stuff at school. That led me down the path of what we do today, Business Lending Blueprint. Basically, we help people build financial literacy and build a loan brokerage business, which is something how I started out, and make money doing so. So that's kind of in a nutshell what my background is and what brought me here.
Excellent. So, every entrepreneur, business owner sort of has their journey, yes, and their story, and everybody's is different. But a lot of things that happen to you when you're young stick with you or impact you throughout your life. My first business was a paper route in fourth grade, and we delivered papers for 5 years in Pittsburgh. And, you just we learned so much by doing that at a young age. So, definitely, I circled in and, had different roles, and then eventually came back to having a business. So, everybody's journey is different, but I think I really look forward to chatting with you about this because, you understand it from both sides, by being impacted from it on the business owner side, as well as being able to have a perspective on, the funding side and the funder side. So, look forward to digging into this topic. But before we get started, I'm just going to play a short video about the Small Business Pro University. This show is just one of the brain trust initiatives that we have through the university. And just want to make sure everybody knows a little bit about the university and some of the other things that we can help and support you with.
Awesome.
Many small businesses experience low or no revenue growth, and the owners are not making enough money. I founded Small Business Pro University to help you break that cycle by empowering you with greater knowledge and enhanced skills to lead your organization more effectively. Over the past 15 years, I've collaborated with organizations like the Small Business Development Center, Rising Tide Capital, Empower the Village, NJMEP, Rutgers University, and SCORE to work one-on-one with over 1,000 business owners and teach tens of thousands of people about business. My experience includes serving as a naval officer, managing businesses, graduating from MIT, earning an MBA from NYU, and achieving the CFA designation, which has prepared me to accomplish my mission of helping 1,000,008 business owners to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth by 2028. My vision is to create the ultimate business ecosystem for entrepreneurs. Small Business Pro University empowers entrepreneurs like you to run their businesses more professionally and create sustainable enterprises. We employ my proven proprietary Masterpreneur Playbook framework to guide your journey along the Masterpreneur path and facilitate your Masterpreneur evolution to work on your business and scale faster and easier. Small Business Pro University provides access to valuable resources, partnerships, and relationships that will help you to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth. Our Masterpreneur initiatives include the Small Business Pro Network, 100+ expert-led multimedia courses, intensive training workshops, Spanish language training, Leadership Live at 8:05 live stream and podcast, in-person Power Breakfast events, and advisory coaching, consulting, and training services. All right, welcome back. I'm here with Oz Konar, and we're talking small business. Good debt, bad debt, smart funding strategies for small business owners. So, Oz, definitely, when we talk about funding, when we talk about access to capital, from your perspective, how should we define the parameters of what financing is and looks like? Because I think it's always good to sort of define what we're going to be talking about a little bit better so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, great question. I think we should have some kind of framework so people understand how we're going to get into this, right? So when it comes to startup or small business financing needs to be used in a way to propel the start and the growth of the business. I know what you hear a lot on social media is like, bootstrapping business, starting with your own funds and growing the business. Obviously, that's the most debt-free way, but understanding how financing can potentially can accelerate your growth, right? And I don't think many small businesses understand it, because many small businesses come from the side of being an employee before they become an employer. So they carry over a lot of these beliefs when it comes to debt, right? And a lot of those beliefs come from the employer mindset of debt is bad. But when you look at a lot more established companies, even multi-billion-dollar companies, a lot of them use debt to their advantage to grow and propel, right? So I think that's could be a good starting point as to helping people understand what is a good debt and what's not, what's a bad debt, and how to make that distinction. And that depends on who you follow, for example, right? If you've been brought up, and similar to I was, hey, don't owe money to anyone. Money doesn't grow on a tree. Make sure that you, earn before you spend, things like that. That's like fundamentally contradicting how the big businesses grow. And we want to make sure, my goal, at least for your audience at the end of this call, have a clear plan as to how they can utilize debt and how to qualify for debt and what is considered good or bad, so they don't end up in a situation where most businesses end up. They have the skill set, the talent, and they might have the great product, but they just run out of the runway. They run out of money, right? That's basically how businesses fail for the most part. It's not because the operator doesn't really know how to run the business day in, day out. It's just they don't know how to account for the expenses, how to understand the finance part of the business, what's profitability, and how they carry debt to get them to the next level.
No, great point. Great point. I mean, definitely, debt can be very good, but like anything else, it's a double-edged sword. It can help you a whole bunch, or it can hurt you worse, depending on your situation and how you take advantage and utilize it.
For sure.
And I guess the other thing is, across the board, there's different stages in businesses. I outlined the Masterpreneur framework, and showing the 5 steps from going from startup to scaling a business. And at different steps, different types of financing is more appropriate for you based on the step you're on, as well as in earlier stages you might not have access to as many different types as when you're further established. Right. So maybe we start with financing for when you're starting up a business, because a lot of people are looking to start a business, want to get financing, want to get grants.
Of course.
A big thing people are saying today is, don't put any of your own money in. Not sure that I agree with that, but what are your perspectives on, if you're going to start a business and financing, what sort of considerations should you have, and what type of financing might you want to get?
Yeah, I think before we talk about financing, it's important for businesses to have a proof of concept on their business idea, right? When you're starting a business, you're excited about everything, right? So some people see it as an exit from their job. Some people hate their boss, and that's the way out. Some people see it as a way to build financial freedom. Some people see it as a way of building wealth. Some people want to do it to build legacy. And some people want to buy time freedom because they spend so much time for the big man or the woman, your boss, basically, right? One thing I would suggest before you consider financing is that you prove it to yourself that your idea, your business idea, has merit, meaning that you're able to sell whatever products and services you're selling, right? And you can do that through rapid prototyping, meaning that if you're going to become an entrepreneur, you need to understand that what you're offering has a buyer. There's a demand for it, right? If you don't know that, and you immediately want to go the route of, let me get some grants, or let me do financing, because at the end of the day, financing is some kind of debt. You're going to have to pay it back at some point. The idea of financing is that you're confident that what you're working on will yield more return, higher return than the money that you're borrowing. And I think that's especially in the small business startup community, that part is the missing part. Many people just look at the financing options first before they have the proof of concept of having a viable business, right? So I do believe, similar to you, putting your own time, either your own resources, either in the form of some money or effort. As Mark Cuban says, sales cures it all, right? So you want to show yourself first that, hey, this idea is good. I can get some customers with minimal effort. It could be friends and family. It could be networking. They're really, really cheap or free ways of getting traffic to your new business. Once you do a couple of rapid prototyping, try different pitches and ideas, variations of your product, and you notice that, I'm working on something, then looking at financing at that point starts making sense. And now going back to your question of what financing options could be a better fit at that point, usually when we help people, with financing options, when they first start out, they might not even have any revenue yet, or some people didn't even register their LLC yet, right? So that's the business is in the formation process, right? They're trying to figure out how to make this work, and then they notice that, hey, if I only had X amount of dollars, I would turn this idea into a reality. And let's say that number is $30,000. So at that point, you have the most limited number of options available to you. Like you said, when you're further in your journey as an entrepreneur, more funding options open up. But as a true startup, either pre-revenue, your options will be based on at least on the alternative lending industry, your personal credit score, right? If you have a business credit score, that's fine, but probably you don't have it because you don't have the established business. Then the funding options available to you could be, we have some options called 0% financing, right? Basically, if your credit score is 680 and above, you potentially qualify for startup funding. So basically what that is you can determine what banks would provide you certain number of credit cards, business-related credit cards, that would allow you to put your cost on that with an introductory rate of 0% for 12 to 18 months. That's the easiest form of getting capital. And if your credit is not at that level, maybe you have a co-signer, maybe you have a partner, maybe you have a spouse, that's how you unlock the first stage. And once you deploy that kind of capital into your business, and before you do that, you need to know what you're going to use the money for. It's another thing that people feel a little lost, like they want to get access to a grant or funding. But we deal with this every day when we ask them, all right, let's say this works out and we're able to help you get like 50K. What are you going to do with the money? The problem is if you don't have a clear plan, when you get the money, the plan is not going to just develop itself, right? You need to have it prior to that. I think that level of that order of thinking will help you get a lot further, not only for securing the funds, but knowing kind of what to do with the funds. Does that help me answer your question, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that you hit on, just because you can get financing doesn't mean that you should.
100%.
And and you really don't want to try and get financing for something that is unproven, because there's a lot of great ideas, but most businesses don't make it and the biggest reason is they don't sell enough. So you could have the greatest product or service ever, but if you can't sell it, you're not going to make it.
No.
And so no matter how much money you have, if you can't make the sales, you're just going to end up wasting it and getting in further debt. So having a plan, knowing what you're going to do, knowing how much money you need, breaking down milestones is key, and especially when you're starting up, so would you say, when you're early on, are there certain types of businesses that financing makes more sense for than others?
Yeah, if you're in a low margin industry, like for example, food industry, right? A lot of the restaurants, coffee shops operate at most 10, 15% profit. Some of the service businesses, they play in higher margins because the cost of delivery is a lot lower than you trying to make someone happy with your food, right? That's why, going back to what you and I just said, sometimes we have people saying that, Oz, I have the best credit. What is the maximum amount I can get? And then we say, well, you can get up to 150K. I want to get the max amount. Like you said, just because you qualify for it doesn't mean you need to have the max amount. Then the next question we usually ask is, how are you planning to use this money? And the answer we want to hear, not for the qualification purposes, but for the health of that business, is that you need to have a clear plan on how you're going to sell your products and services. Because if you don't have it down, you don't know your ideal customers, you don't need to know everything, but throwing more money at something that you didn't plan doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but also you have run the chance of not being able to pay it back, because no matter how long the payback period is or the low the interest is, you're using somebody else's money, like other people's money, to fund your business. At the end of the day, I can't emphasize it enough that you need to have clarity on your go-to-market strategy, right? Well, how am I going to sell this product? If I'm not the salesperson, do you have someone who's going to sell this product? If someone says, I am interested in your product, what am I going to say? Those things can be tested before you actually need the capital. And the businesses who need the capital most are the ones who need to buy some kind of equipment. Those are usually the better fit. Like when you're running, let's say, a coaching offer, you don't necessarily need an equipment. But if you're gonna need a food truck for your business, you're gonna need to lease or to buy the food truck. Or if you're running a construction company, you're gonna need some equipments, and those can be financed through the funding systems, right? If we have different funding opportunities for that, you can use credit to buy them. You can finance the actual equipment. Those are the things that you need to fully understand. All right, so those are the top industries that we fund. Even if you're starting a software business, software is an equipment too. So you need to be clear on what the cost, like the cost of running that business. Then you can say, all right, so if I borrow X amount of dollars, how many units of what I'm selling need to sell to break even, and prepare for the worst case scenario. Like you said, many small businesses do not make it because what we notice as a pattern is that they haven't prepared for what is potentially coming. Sometimes things go really, really well initially. Like you have more demand than you know what to do with. And then that also becomes a problem too. But we don't necessarily have like favorable industries. We look at more like, what is the business? What is your experience with that business? You might not have the direct experience running that business, but maybe you have relevant sales experience, right? Because you have the sales experience, I have the sales experience. So that experience goes parallel to many industries. So I can take that skill set and use it in an industry. That makes me, maybe the lender doesn't care about it, but when I borrow money, I know that I find a way to turn it into more money. So that way what I owe will not prohibit my growth. It's not going to get to a point that I won't be able to pay it back. So that prep time, anyone who's listening right now, you might be, really hungry for tonight's conversation, trying to find out how do I get funding, but can you answer some of the questions? Like how are you selling your current products? And if you added more money to it, how will that improve? Or you're just getting money for the sake of getting money. That kind of is a good segue into bad debt. That's how you kind of go from a good intention to, oh, I have a bunch of money right now, I'm going to just try this and try that. And before you know, that turns into a bad debt. And now you're in a downward spiral.
Excellent. So actually that's really good segue to one of the questions we have from the audience. And of course, we always appreciate everybody tuning into the show, sharing your comments, your questions, and we're trying to get it to everybody's question. Can't always get to all of them, but if not, feel free to follow up with one of us as well. But this question here is, can bad debt, actually, let me do this. Can bad debt ever turn into good debt with the right strategy?
Oh, certainly can. Yeah. So we have a lot of comeback stories of people who, because business is a learning experience, Andrew, right? So when you first started out, you didn't know what you know right now. And sometimes you learn through mistakes. The challenge is, like the saying goes, whatever doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. That is wrong. Some things can kill you or leave you crippled, right? So we don't want to just say, oh, trial and error, I'm going to figure it out. But yeah, maybe early on in your adventure, you made some mistakes and you got bad debt, but it could be the one good hire that you brought, or maybe you change your approach to selling it, you turn it into an opportunity. So just because you have some bad debt doesn't mean that's the end of the road for you. Honestly, like a couple of sales can turn the business around, right? So that's why I emphasize you might not be the greatest salesperson, but I can guarantee it's a skill that can be learned, or you can find people who already have that skill set. Because Andrew, I met people who are great operators, but they might suck at sales and marketing, but they're really good at running the business, but they can be a magnet to great people who can sell the product and services, right? So we don't want to just think our situation being hopeless. It's just very important to stay logical and grounded and thinking, what is happening here? What is the issue? I can guarantee you 80-90% of the time, the issue is not having enough sales. And it could be the sales mechanism. Yeah, as your business grows, you might have fulfillment problems, quality problems, and things like that. But they're usually, even those can be made up by selling more. It just buys you more runway. So you fix your onboarding, you fix your delivery, you get better products, you get better manufacturers and things like that. So I don't want to be misunderstood. Just because you made a bad decision doesn't mean it's the end of the road. I mean, look at the big companies. They always make horrible decisions, and sometimes they come back winning by changing the strategy. So right strategy is extremely important.
Okay, so definitely. And maybe we should have chatted about, what would you consider bad debt to be?
Bad debt is a couple of things. One, if you don't know what you're going to use the money for, most of the time it's going to end up being a bad debt, right? Or if that is funding your personal lifestyle because you want to create this mirage or image that you're this wealthy entrepreneur and you want to drive fancy cars, and that's usually how you end up in debt. Good debt is the debt that makes more babies, basically makes more money, right? So if you borrow 100,000, do you really have a solid strategy that can turn into 2x, 3x, 4x? That's how you use debt. But sometimes small businesses get this idea that looks are more important than actual business operations. It's okay if you're driving an old beat up car for a while, but if your sales are developing, you're able to not only pay off debt, because don't forget that these lenders they're human beings, right? They want to look at the health of the business, so you can get more debt. If they see the healthy payment history that you're making, they believe in your business more, then you can unlock more funding opportunities. We see this all the time. Someone starts with $10,000 in funding. A year into it, they unlock $250,000 in funding. That's a lot of money, because you show to the lenders and lender networks and funding options that, hey, I'm a business owner, I know how to use money. It works the other way too. If someone gets the funding and if they decide to go on a shopping spree, or they don't really have a clear strategy and they're taking this money and using it as like a trial and error, let me throw 10K into this marketing avenue. Let me just spend 20K on this, maybe a conference that could be helpful, without a solid plan as to why it is it that you're doing that. Is it solving the immediate problem right now, right? If you have a sales issue, you spending $20,000 on an amazing looking website might not really solve the problem. It's not about the looks, right? Maybe you're not at a point to spend money on branding. Maybe you need to spend that money on a proven process, hiring amazing talent, solving technology-related problems, so it makes it easier for your customers to come back and buy more from you, doing surveys and paying your customers to give you feedback. So maybe your coffee is a little too bitter and you just want to make that better, and you want to change your supplier and things like that. So money spent on things like that that will help you build the next phase of your business is definitely a good debt to have. But anything else, can be considered in a scale very, very bad debt. If you're just going and buying a $5,000 purse when your business did $3,000 this month, that's not going to pay the bills. But it's an investment. Like we have businesses, for example, they are in a network of other businesses who do direct mail campaigns, right? So they take the money. They say, hey, I'm going to do direct mail to this zip code because let's say I'm in the roofing business. If I do three times mailers out to them, I can potentially get 30 appointments. Out of 30 appointments, my closing percentage is 20%. That could mean 6 sales. The average ticket is $20,000. That could mean $120,000. So borrowing $20,000 to make $120,000 is definitely not bad debt.
Great point. You got to look at not just the, acquiring customers. You got the customer acquisition cost, but you also have, your margins.
Yes.
And, how much are you going to make on a customer? So how much does it cost to get a customer? And then what's your return going to be on that? One of the big things about debt is it adds risk to your company.
Sure.
Because, you have a steady cash outflow. But the other thing is, lenders don't like risk. So, it's important to reduce the risk as much as possible to become more eligible to get financing. What are some ways you can reduce the risk, especially early on in a business? There is a lot of risk.
Yeah, for a new business, the risk is the highest usually. The question I ask people is, if you were the lender, if you put yourself in the lender's shoes, these lenders sometimes have access to $1 million, tens of hundreds of millions of dollars. If you had access to that capital, would you provide funding to your business? Like if you think of your business as someone else's business, if you look at the structure, the product, how much you know about the product, and you're the lender, would you give the okay to fund yourself 50K, 70K, 100K or so, right? So I think that's a good question for people to think about. For a lender, what they pay attention to is, like you said, lenders want to know. If you ever watch Shark Tank, they ask specific questions, right? Cost per good sold, like how much does it cost for you to have your product ready? Cost of fulfillment, LTV, lifetime value of a customer. Maybe, let's say you're selling a product, it takes you $1,000 to acquire one customer, and it takes you $1,000 to fulfill that customer. So you're breaking even, you're not really making money. But maybe that customer is in a subscription plan. So month 2, you're in profit. And if you know that you're going to hold on to that customer for 7 months, now all of a sudden you're very profitable. So as a business, you need to understand your cost structure. How much do things cost me? Then you can build your pricing. Many businesses suffer from mispricing, right? They either give away their products for too cheap, or they try to have the white glove service without having the white gloves, basically, and they want to overcharge. And when it kind of backfires, they just question the entire business. Sometimes it could be as simple as a pricing issue. Or they find out a year later that, oh, shoot, we're not actually making money. We generated X amount of sales, but we're bleeding money. How is that possible? So trust me, when lender, let's say you're 6 months into your actual business, you're generating revenue, and you want to get funding, and you send your bank statements to a lender to analyze, those are the things they're going to look at. How many late payments do you have? Do you have good accounting practices? I know it sounds like there's a lot to learn, because there is, right? Because when you make it as a small business, it can be extremely, extremely profitable, but it doesn't make it easy. Certain things do not change. If you don't know your cost of goods, if you don't know your profit margin, you don't know your fulfillment time, how long it will take for you to fulfill it. If you don't know your marketing costs, how much does it cost for you to get one customer? Because it's a cost game at the end of the day. Even if you're just going to networking events to find your first customer, there's a time cost involved. Are you okay to spending? Now that's when I first started out, I was going to like 4 or 5 networking events per week because I didn't have the money to spend on marketing. I was using basically my time to go to events to meet people, right? And then when you do, there's your cost of travel, talking to people, bringing back a bag of business cards and connecting with those people and things like that. So you need to have, like, you can take a pen and paper and write down those things to understand, all right, if my cost is $800, then it makes sense to sell my products for maybe double, $1,600. How does it stack against someone who's selling similar or the same product? Am I competitive enough in the marketplace? So we can go on, but those are like the simple metrics that you need to have control before, I guess, you go down the journey of asking a lender to evaluate it, so you don't get surprised, because those are the things they're going to ask you and want to find out more about your business.
No, great points. Definitely when you talk about pricing, that's a conversation into itself, because, it's an art, not a science, but there's scientific quantitative things that need to go into it to make sure that you're making money. But, understanding your costs, understanding your pricing. And I really liked how you mentioned, turning the tables. I actually do workshops on financing, and I have a trading places exercise. So, I have 3 scenarios that I have, them read in groups, and I ask them, well, would you finance this with your own money? And it's amazing how tough the groups are on other people's stuff.
Yes.
But, when they turn around and say, oh man, I don't have all that stuff. So, it's really important to think about it. Would you invest in it with your own money? And not just that, you got to think of it as a lender. Lending, lenders sometimes get fired for a bad loan. So would you risk your job on that loan? And I think that adds a little bit more seriousness,
yes,
to your preparation, because it is serious, and those are some of the dynamics that are happening if you're trying to get financing. So So I think
Yeah,
that
lenders go out of business all the time, Andrew, because they make poor investment decisions, right? So they invest in and if you build a framework of thinking, if this was my money, would I fund this business that I own? That's a tough question, tough to swallow, honestly, for a lot of people.
yes, but a lot of times they don't even think about that question.
No.
But that it's important to ask yourself that. So you also mentioned about knowing your numbers, and far too many business owners don't know their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
What numbers should they know, and how can they learn them?
Yeah, I think there are hard costs and soft costs to your business, right? We see it all the time. Like, business has this great idea. The first thing they want to do is they want to lease an office and be the boss. Like, I want to have my own office. I want to have a fancy office. I used to see this a lot in New York City when I started working with the actual loan brokers with big offices. You would walk into this skyscraper, very fancy, marbles everywhere, men in suits and stuff like that. And knowing the area, I would know that the average cost to rent a place like that would be $20,000-$30,000 a minimum. Then you have your payroll, then you have your ancillary and phantom cost that comes with it. So before you generate a single sales, you're probably like $30,000-$40,000 out. So then business honestly stops being fun, and then you're just basically paying off the debt that you created. So that's the first question you need to ask yourself. Is this something I can do virtually? Or if it has to be a physical location, maybe you're in food services, you need to have a restaurant. How much of the cost will eat into my profit? And you want to have like a mental simulation. And nowadays you can do this with ChatGPT or any kind of large language models too. Right? If my hard cost is $10,000 per month to start out, how much of the products and services I should be able to sell to break even? Like, you got to have that number before you sign that dotted line for a 3-year lease, or before you buy that truck or the car or whatever you're buying, or the equipment, right? I was talking to a business owner recently. She's running one of those beauty clinics, right? Like permanent makeup and stuff like that. And she was asking me, hey, we have this machine that if you buy that, it's going to add additional maybe a few $100,000 a year. The cost of the machine is $75,000. Does that make sense? I said, well, when you say a few $100,000, that's such a broad number. Like, how much? I know you're not going to know it to the penny, but if you look at, did you survey similar businesses? Like, how many people are interested in using that machine for whatever improvement they have on their skin, right? And how much the monthly cost that financing will be when you finance a $75,000 machine. If the cost of finances is $3,000 a month, I'm just making up the numbers, right? And you already have a running cost from your physical location of $5,000. All of a sudden, your hard cost went to like $8,000. And I'm not putting in the marketing and the employees and the payroll and all that stuff, right? So you need to know those numbers, because sometimes, like you said, you might not be able to figure out the pricing immediately. That requires some expertise. It changes based on the trends, the physical location, the demographics of your audience. It's going to be very difficult to nail the right pricing on the first go, but you should be able to know your hard costs and compare it against the best case and the worst case scenario. If things do not work out, are you going to end up in $500,000 in debt? Or can you start slow a little bit, get the proof of concept, like we said in the beginning, and understand your numbers a little more, such as, is that a continuity model, or is it a one-time customer? They buy from you from once and they won't need your services. In that specific example, she does permanent makeup. So like the name suggests, it is permanent. So when someone gets it, they're not going to come back to get more makeup services done, right? So then you have that one lifetime, your lifetime value is just the one-time fee that you charge. If that is the case, then it might make sense to add other things that will add the continuity, things like that. So once you understand your cost, then the whole, and sometimes this is the hard part, because small businesses, when they first start out, they want to live in that land of euphoria. If everything goes well, I can drive Lamborghinis and move into a better house and things like that. That's awesome. I want everyone to do that, but also understand that these are very serious conversations for you to consider before you either get yourself in debt or even start the business, right? So when you're buying something, leasing an office, making negotiations with a manufacturer, you need to ask those questions. What is the per unit cost? Let's say you're selling, I don't know, bottles or jars. If I buy 100 of them, can you bring the price down? What is the unit cost of those things? And how much can I sell? How much can I sell it for? What is my margin? And on top of that, the rent and other expenses. Okay, my total cost per unit is $15, let's say. So I need to be able to sell this for $20. Can I sell this for $20? Or I don't know. Listen, let me go out there and try to sell it to a few people. If I don't have massive buying resistance, even when I don't have any branding, no website or anything like that, that's a good sign. If you're having massive buying resistance, that could be your sales style, or the product might not be as much demand as you think it is. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Definitely. I think so. You mentioned a couple important things. And, one thing is, what you do and the order you do it in is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to put the cart before the horse. It's so important to keep your overhead low, especially in the beginning. And, most successful business owners are cheap, or you could say frugal.
Yes.
Because you have to be. So, definitely, understanding that and using, numbers and understanding of relationships to make the right decisions is critical. And, like you said before, if you're going to borrow money, you need it to make money. So you shouldn't just be borrowing money to hire employees if you don't have enough sales to have those employees at that time. So just, understanding the order and sales should be driving everything.
Yes. That's the first thing, Andrew, right? Because when you think about it, I think in our personal lives, we measure things differently, right? For example, Andrew, if you're a father, for me to measure if you're a good father or not, I can't measure it by dollars. The currency is different, right? But in business, the only currency is how much revenue is business generating and how much profit. So you might be the most amazing looking person or the best person on earth, but the market doesn't care if you're not making enough margins. Then the only currency in business is how much sales you're generating, how much margins you're keeping, and if you're keeping the cost. Because if you're making $1 million and spending $1.5 million, you might consider yourself $1 million company, but you're in debt for like $500,000. I say that all the time. My revenue is like $3 million. I'm like, that's revenue. What's your profit? Oh no, we don't measure that. Well,
probably because you don't have any.
Because you don't have it.
But true, very true. So, we talked a little, good amount about startups, but, also want to take a look at, well, first, I guess let me bring this question up. How should beginners approach their first business loan? So if you haven't had financing before, how should you approach getting financing?
Yeah, great question. So the approach is first you want to look at all the options that you have, right? So let's say you talk to a business loan broker. One of the things you want to ask is, what kind of funding options do you provide? Because you don't really want to work with someone who only has one funding option they focus on, because guess what? That's what they're going to try to sell you, right? As a business, as a part of your due diligence, you want to understand if you're getting your first business loan, let's say you're in business for like 6 months or a year, right? You're like, all right, it's time for us to expand. Maybe you're going to buy better machinery, or you want to hire a marketing agency. You want to throw some money at paid ads and things like that. And then you're like, all right, how do I look at this? Well, most businesses, the mistake they make is that they don't know what their options are. They don't know what kind of funding options are available to them for the stage they're at. We talked about startup funding. You don't really have a whole lot of options other than 0% financing based on your personal credit score. But if you move more into existing business realm, and if your business is older than 6 months, more options open up, right? So when you're making that decision, you want to exhaust all the options of what's available out there so you don't fall into the trap of super expensive money. Because businesses don't always need capital because they want to grow. Sometimes emergency funds are needed, right? So your fridge, breaks, your walk-in box breaks, and food is about to go bad, and something bad happens with your health that you still need to make the payroll this coming Friday, those are the scenarios that you need funds, and you need funds like yesterday. Know that that's going to be the most expensive form of money you're going to get, because we have lenders who provide funding within the same day or 24 days, but they're going to charge you a lot more money because the risk is a lot higher. Remember the conversation we had about, hey, would you fund yourself? You have a business coming to you telling you, oh my God, things are on fire, I need this emergency money right now, like today. Well, they're going to charge you the most amount of money. But sometimes businesses, when they do not need that kind of capital, they end up getting that kind of capital that should be puzzling to you, because that means you haven't looked into other options, because there's like equipment financing, SBA, like government-backed funding options are available for small businesses too. So as a beginner business owner, you want to do your research and understand what options are available, what is the best option for my current situation and what I want to do. Then at the end, how affordable is this debt for me, right? So if you're beginner business owner, 3 months, 6 months, a year into it, you probably have your numbers in front of you, like some activity is happening, whether small or big, and then never just take one offer. Basically, if someone says this is all I can get you, no problem, appreciate it, let me look at other offers to see what else is available, so that way you don't fall into the trap of getting yourself into super expensive money when you do not need to, because you might need it at some point. It's a necessary evil, but either you waited too long for it. It's always good to be informed about how you can fund your business. And that goes back to the conversation of your belief system. If you think all debt is bad, you won't even look into the funding options until you're in a really, really bad situation. Then you're going to be forced to take the money to save the business. And sometimes that's not even enough. So kind of making your peace with getting access to other people's money is the first mental step. Then the second step is, all right, for my age, even if you don't need capital, for example, we provide capital to a lot of businesses through our network in the form of a business line of credit. They don't need the money right now, but it's better to ask for money when you don't need it than, trying to get the money today because you need it urgently,
That's a great point. There's a lot of different types of financing, and you want to make sure you get the financing that matches your need. One big trap that people fall into is they finance long-term assets with short-term debt. And what that does is it jams up your cash flow.
Yes.
And, cash is oxygen as a business owner. So, if you don't remember, one thing to always remember, if you're buying a big asset, you want to get term financing rather than using the line of credit or other things, because, you're exhausting your cash and losing flexibility. So definitely finding the right match for what you're trying to do is key.
Absolutely.
Definitely got a question here as well. And, asking about, what's a safer way to scale using borrowed money? You talk about people being, shy of getting financing, but, how can you make it safer for people to feel more comfortable doing the financing, and what can they do for that?
Yeah, Bob asked a smart question. That's a really smart question. So success leaves clues, right? The smartest way to use money is to follow a predictable path of what others like you have done with the money before. I don't know what industry he is in, but let's take roofing, right? So there's so many examples of other businesses or communities of other roofers, like Facebook groups. You can definitely kind of backtrack how, let's say you need the money. Smartest way to use money is to use it for marketing and growth, so to make more money with it, not to cover up expenses or the debt, ideally, right? We don't live in an ideal world. It's not a perfect world. But the smartest way to use that is, all right, if Oz gets me $100,000, I have a predictable way of turning that into $300,000. What you don't want to do is do trial and error. I hope that this works out. Crossing my fingers. I know my brother-in-law did some marketing back in the day. I'm just going to give him the money to do that. Those are the things that might end up costing you a lot more. So you want to follow in the footsteps of others who've gone through ways of using marketing. Like how I learned marketing is I join masterminds, and I join in people like Andrew, who has a predictable blueprint on helping you guys understand kind of what to do at what stage. So if you keep an open mind and learn from others, you reduce your chance of turning good debt into massive bad debt. That's why I don't want people. I do not like people saying it's a trial and error. We'll just see what happens, and hopefully the economy gets better. Politics, wars, and all of that. So for the most part, you want to follow the path of people who've done similar things before you, and you want to learn from people who are at least 3-4 times bigger than you in that specific type of business, so you can follow in the footsteps of that person, right? If you're going to do marketing, well, there's so many different types of marketing. Maybe for your industry, direct mail marketing would be a waste of money. But if you're telling me my gut feeling tells me, Oz, that this is going to work out, your gut feeling is probably wrong because it's not scientific, right? Again, not trying to be too hard on the audience, but I want to make sure that we instill the right ways to think about things and on the good framework. So when you're thinking about something, all right, I'm going to get this money. What do I do with it? Well, the best person to ask that question is the people who are like you, who were in your position before, and what did they do with that money, and how did they utilize it? So your chances of losing your assets, your future receivables and cash and savings is a lot less than before. Business is risky as is. I don't believe in making it more riskier.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Some ways I think of as far as making it less risky, pre-selling. I work with a client that actually sold what they made before they even made it. So basically their customer was financing their whole business to a tune of 7 figures.
Mm-hmm.
Pre-selling, even if you get the agreements, getting contracts, getting things in place so that you have revenue that is coming. You're not just borrowing money for maybe getting revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, AR financing is good because it just gets you your money back sooner, but you already made the money.
100%. Another thing, Andrew, is that sometimes I hear, oh yeah, I want to get some sales, but I need to go to conferences. I need to have a booth, right? I need to get in front of people. Yeah, but is that the only way that you can do it? But you can attend a lot of the conferences for free or very low cost without having a booth and have access to the same audience. So don't condition yourself under that. I must have this, therefore I can have sales. There's so many if you go to meetup.com or like Eventbrite, there's some kind of event happening near you, and I guarantee you some of your customers are there. And a lot of those events are either completely free or like $10, $15, right? So don't put yourself in a box thinking that this has to happen for this to work. Like you said, sales first mentality. Who's got my money? Where's my audience? Okay, so if I go talk to them, what will they say? So if you can guarantee that, sell a couple of your units. It's okay to tell the customer, you can buy it right now, but just so you know, we're a startup company. It's going to take us 3 weeks to get the product. Is that okay? And some people appreciate that honesty, right? Setting expectations. So you can figure out the financing, the cash to make it happen, pre-sell it. You can get, as entrepreneurs, that's one definition of entrepreneur, how fast you can get creative with what you need to do. Like, I'm in creative financing. You teach creative ways for people to grow the business. That's the thinking that business owner need to have. Like, all right, I don't want to just condition myself to this one way of doing things, and I need 50K to do that. Like, all right, what if you didn't have that money? Would we just give up? I'm sure you're going to figure out another way to build a business and grow the business.
Definitely. And many times people try to use money instead of as an excuse or a way to not have to sell.
Yes.
So they figure, if I get money to do that or make it feel like you sell, I always, harken back to, if you're going to go, sometimes people want to lose weight. So, they'll go buy some shoes and a new sweatsuit, and you feel like you did something, but you didn't really do anything.
You didn't do
And,
anything. Yeah.
you could do that with money also. So, I think definitely that could be a challenge. But you have to really understand, what you're trying to do. So what else should growing businesses be thinking about when looking to get financing?
Yeah, growing businesses, one thing many people do not even know is building business credit. It's one of the least known topics. I know many people know about their FICO score. They can go to Credit Karma, Identity IQ. There's so many places you can check your personal credit score. But as your business ages, you want your business to have its own credit identity. That's called business credit. There are a lot of resources on how to build business credit that has to do with where you buy your inventory, because some vendors report to business credit, some do not. By simply switching where you shop from can start building your business's own identity. All right, Oz, why is that important? Well, businesses with strong business credit almost always qualify for higher funding limits than you as a person with your personal credit. One example, if you're providing funding to a business based on their personal credit, the most amount you're going to get could be $100,000, $150,000. But if you're dealing with a business with a solid business credit, that same business could potentially get funded for $250,000 and up to $500,000, right? So as you're growing your business, let's say you're making some sales, you might not even be a lot profitable, but if you're buying things, you're buying paper towel, toilet paper, I don't know, you're buying supplies, we might want to look into and study how business credit works and get your Dun & Bradstreet number. That is basically your business's identity on the credit bureaus, right? They're not, ranking your credit score in business works differently than your personal credit. So that's very underrated skill set that people don't even know about, and they forget about it. Either they don't know anything about it, they're 5 years into the business, 7 years into the business, and their business doesn't have any business credit at all. That's also the least expensive way for you to get access to capital. For example, Amex can offer you unlimited credit card with like a net 30, net 60 payment period. So you're basically borrowing from Amex, and then you have means to pay it instead of borrowing from a lender who might charge you 20, 30, 50, 80%, or even more than that, right? So for people who's getting more mature in business, you definitely want to start shifting things from your personal credit score. And you might get to a point that as your business credit strengthens, that you don't even need to sign loan documents with your personal guarantee, right? So one day, if you go out of business, or if you want to sell your business, or your business has a lot of debt, you at least protect your personal assets. So that's one thing I would say that's very underrated, and most small businesses have no idea that even exists.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, I'm just looking up, an hour goes really fast. I didn't even realize what time it is.
Wow, it's been an hour already.
Yeah, but, I think it's because we're talking about such valuable stuff, and there's so much you can learn about this, but hopefully, everybody's taking away something that can help them prepare them for their future financing. But before I let you go, what I would ask you to do is share 3 key takeaways for people from the show, because we talked about a whole bunch of things, but most people can't really remember more than 3 things anyway. So, give it a second, a little bit of thought. What would the 3 most important things for people to take away from what we discussed, and that can be utilized going forward? And I'm going to play a short video about one of the most important things that you need to do with your business, and beyond selling. And then we'll be back and hear the top 3 takeaways from Oz.
Awesome.
You risk cash flow
tax, and profitability issues without timely, accurate financial records. Unfortunately, most business owners are not happy with their current bookkeeping situation.
Actually, our bookkeeper kind of left us. He actually got a job.
Many struggle with it themselves or have trouble finding the right help at a reasonable price. Even if you have a bookkeeper, there are often inaccuracies that can cost you money due to their lack of accounting knowledge and experience.
We had a lot of missing holes in our reporting. Things was a little hard to keep track of.
Fortunately, it doesn't have to be that way. That's why I incorporated small business-friendly bookkeeping into our service offerings.
Working with Andrew and Small Business Pro University was a very easy process. They really understood our numbers and our data very quickly and what needed to happen.
We meet you where you are, whether you want to switch to save money or need us to clean up past issues.
Since working with you, we've definitely been able to catch up on a lot of those missing holes and fill those gaps. So from a business standpoint, I'm able to understand my numbers a lot better.
Bringing everything current for tax and compliance purposes.
Along came Andrew Frazier. In a short period of time, they got us up to date, and now we're fine, and they're handling our bookkeeping.
Use the link below to schedule a complimentary discovery session to explore how we can help. www.sbprou.com/discovery. You have everything to gain and nothing to lose by scheduling a complimentary discovery session to explore how we can help at www.sbprou.com/discovery.
All right, welcome back. I'm here with Oz Konar, and we were talking about good debt, bad debt, and smart strategies for funding your small business. So Oz, what are the 3 key takeaways that people should have based on a discussion tonight?
Yeah. The first one should be obvious to your audience because they're following you. But one thing that changed my life is find yourself a mentor. Life is too short to figure things out through trial and error. Work with people who have proven track record, and they can show you the way. That can shave years off of your life, and also could potentially save you millions of dollars and help you grow. That's the first thing. Second thing is take imperfect action. There's no perfect moment. You're not going to master everything in day one. You can't wait for the perfect day, perfect season, perfect politics or the country. You just got to take action, right? And that's what counts. Like what you do after you're exhausted, you think all the option. That's what counts. So you got to just keep pushing yourself to the next thing. And the third thing is, I'm just going off of my own personal experience and the people that I mentored, is definitely invest into the sales and marketing skill set. It's okay if you don't know how they work, but learn from others. You learn from, I don't know, AI or YouTube and whatnot, but specifically understand how to sell a product and service and how to understand marketing, the power of marketing. So those are the 3 things that I would say to sum it up. First, get a good mentor with a proven track record. 2, take imperfect action. And 3, invest into learning the marketing and sales skills.
Excellent. Definitely, like you said, mentors can save you a lot of time, a lot of headaches, a lot of money, and give you perspective, and can be the difference between you succeeding and not succeeding. Of course, you have to find the right mentors.
Absolutely. That's the biggest difference. Yes.
But you should also have multiple mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, they should be providing you knowledge and information, but you need to figure out how to use that to make the best decisions. Imperfect action, I think of it as analysis paralysis many times. Yes. You're not sure what to do, so you do nothing. And that's the worst thing you can do, because you don't learn anything if you do nothing. Even the best laid plans, they're not going to work out perfectly. Mm-hmm. But the goal is to have a plan that you can try and, continue to get closer and closer to where you need to be. But if you don't try your plan, you're still in the same place and you're not getting any closer to the success that you're seeking. And finally, sales and marketing. The first question I ask people is, what's your most important job as a business owner?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sales and marketing. And sales is not marketing and marketing is not sales.
No, different things.
But, at the end of the day, you need to build your expertise in those things, because the biggest driver of your success in business is being able to sell and market, hands down. So this has been great, Oz. You shared a lot of valuable insights, definitely had some great comments and questions from the audience. And that's really what it's all about. Before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to share?
The final thoughts is, like you said, sales and marketing are different things. The simplest definition of that: marketing gets the eyeballs, sales turns eyeballs into money. Just think about it that way. How do I get eyeballs on my business? How do I turn those eyeballs into people who are paying for the services? If you can answer those two questions with as much structure as possible, you're good.
Okay, excellent. And, throughout the show, we've included your LinkedIn profile and your website. So, if you're listening in and you want to connect further with Oz, get to know a little bit more about what he does, those are available in the chat. So thanks again, Oz. If you could hang on for a minute, I'm going to close things out and then we'll chat for a minute.
Awesome.
So,
thanks for having me, Andrew.
Okay, great. So, once again, appreciate Oz being on the show. What we talked about is so important for business owners. And, obviously it's something that a lot of business owners don't really know a whole bunch about, but it makes sense because it doesn't happen all that often. But, when you do it, you want to make sure you do it the right way. So hopefully this gave you some insights to either be able to do it the right way, or at least know that you don't know how to do it the right way, and get some help to be able to do it the right way. So, definitely always appreciate everybody tuning in. Hopefully we'll see you next week as well. We're going to be talking about leading with value, turning community and content into revenue without being overly salesy. So hopefully you can join us for that next week. And always remember, at the end of the day, the more that you know, the faster and more successfully your business is going to grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.